In this section, you are going to delve into the topic of Hindu temple worship. What you're seeing here is a timeline of the development of puja rituals. According to scholars of Hinduism more broadly, one of the earliest mentions of puja, the process of worship at temples, is in the Griya Sutras, which provide the rules for domestic rites. These sutras date to about 500 BCE, and they use the term puja to describe the hospitality to honor priests who were invited to one's homes to lead rituals for departed ancestors, rather than rituals to gods themselves, which is of note. As with Vedic times, the general concept of puja remained approximately the same, but expanded to welcoming the deities along with the deity's spiritual essence as one of the honored guests in puja rituals. The Puranic corpus of literature, dating from about the 6th century CE, contained extensive outlines on how to perform deity puja or deva puja, puja specifically to deities. So this is at the other end of the spectrum. We're talking about 500 BCE to about 600 CE. Deity puja or deva puja thus melds Vedic rites with the devotion to an individual deity in its ritual form. As many other aspects of Hinduism have shown us so far, both Vedic puja and devotional deva puja continued, and the choice was left up to the individual as to which element of the practice they would emphasize. As a historical practice, puja in Hinduism has been modeled around the idea of hosting a deity or an important person as an honored and dear guest, the best way that one can, giving one's resources, food, flowers, scented aromatic offerings, and receiving their benedictions, happiness, and blessings in return. Paul Thame has suggested from passages in the Ramayana, a text that you will read a translation of later, or sections of, that the word puja referred to the hospitable reception of the guests and the things offered to the guests that could be offered to the gods and in their dwellings. The rituals in question were the 5 great sacrifices, or the Pancha Mahayajna, which were recorded in the Griya Sutta texts for the Kalpa study period. So this Griya Sutra is labeled on the timeline. The development of puja thus emerged a bit from the Vedic domestic traditions and was carried into temple environment by analogy. And we can see that this is something that transformed from the end of the late Vedic period through the Puranic period. So if you're talking Vedic religion as a distinct, separate religion, maybe there's some elements of the Proto-Hindu stuff in there, but then you're building this puja ritual, which is not really puja the way we think of it as devotional worship to an individual deity, hosting them in a temple, until you get to the Puranic period. So there's a transformation that takes place there. Nonetheless, copperplate charters record grants of lands to temples and suggest that this religious practice was actually actively encouraged from about the mid-4th century as a wrinkle in our understanding of the development here. So what we have on the one hand is these Griya Suttas, which are recording early concepts from the Vedic period, post-Vedic period. Then, on the other hand, Puranic period, where we definitely have some puja, and then this copperplate evidence in the middle here, right around 400 CE, that suggests, look, people are already building temples through land grants at that point. So clearly the temples existed, and perhaps the worship of puja as deva puja at the temples existed before we get to the Puranic period. So it is a subject of discussion, an open discussion, but what you do see here is a clear trajectory of the development of puja that changes over several centuries. Now, puja itself as a concept can be individual rather than communal. It could include the images, the murtis, the prayers, the mantras, and the diagrams of the universe known as yantras as part of ritual offerings. It's central to Hindu worship and includes frequently images or icons as representation of deities at temples or shrines, as you see in the case of Ganesha in this shrine in the image on the slide. This is an individual household rather than a communal worship in this case. Worshippers repeat the names of their favored deities, gods or goddesses, and repeat mantras during puja. Water, fruit, flowers, and incense are offered to these gods. The worship might occur at the home. The majority of Hindu homes have shrines in them where offerings and prayers are said, and this is contemporary. A shrine may be anything: a room, a small altar. Think about the very small shrine of Hanuman that I showed you in the first week. Family members often worship together. Rituals should, strictly speaking, be performed 3 times a day at least, but some Hindus don't perform them at all, and others wear sacred threads and perform them even more frequently. There is sacred threads to indicate the varnas of individuals, so cotton for Brahmin priests, hemp for kshatriyas, rulers and soldier classes, wool for the vaishyas, the merchants and the travelers, those who work in the markets. At temple puja, you have a different sort of puja, and you might have more communal sort of aspects with different varnas being brought together at temple worship. Then you also have religious sites where there would be worship at high holidays, especially they might be the sites of pilgrimage, so worship can be combined with pilgrimage, and this particularly occurs during the high holiday of Kumbh Mela. Now there's a specific type of rituals called nitya. Nitya rituals are performed daily and consist of offerings made at the home shrine, performing puja to family deities. Now that's most common. Then there's namitika, which are rituals which are important but only occur at certain times during the year. These would be celebrations that are larger. And then there's kamya, which are rituals which are optional but are highly desirable. Pilgrimage is one such. It would be considered kamya, right? So pilgrimage, you're dealing with optional stuff, but the more sort of local 3 times a day, that's considered more mandatory. Although in practice, of course, that's not what most people are doing. This being said, you also have individual sites such as the River Ganges, which are sort of perpetual pilgrimage sites, not just pilgrimage sites associated with high holidays, but people go to bathe in the River Ganges because of its holy nature, and it's a consistent puja site for that reason. And then other sites such as Varanasi, which is really quite interesting because it sort of combines Buddhism with Hinduism, and many Hindus who are nearby Varanasi are completely okay with recognizing Buddhism as a representation of a Hindu sage, for example, and even an incarnation of Vishnu. So completely incorporating Buddhism into Hinduism, and therefore Varanasi becomes part of Hinduism in that instance. A very notable instance of puja occurs during Kumbh Mela, as I've mentioned. Kumbh Mela occurs once every 12 years when you have up to 10 million or more people who share in a ritual bathing at the Kumbh Mela festival in Allahabad, where the waters from the Ganges and the Jumna combine. So you have the combination of these 2 holy waters at that particular site. Hindus from all walks of life gather there for ritual bathing, believing that their past bad karma will be literally washed away, and the bathing is followed by spiritual purification and ceremonies which secure the blessings and the benedictions of the Ganga as the deity of the Ganges River. The river Ganges is, of course, the holiest of all rivers for Hindus, frequently a site for the burning of bodies, as well as other rituals. And Varanasi, as I mentioned, Benares is situated on the banks of the Ganges, so it's tied into this as well. It's also notable that Varanasi is said to be the home of Lord Shiva, where legend has it that his fiery light broke through the earth to reach the heavens. There is an understanding that a Hindu who dies at Varanasi and has their ashes scattered on the Ganges at Varanasi is said to have experienced the best death possible. So this is a cremation site as well. Now, temple puja occurs at a mandir or a temple. So you have mandir puja as the category. It is more elaborate than domestic versions and typically done several times a day. There are also mandir pujas that are performed by temple priests or pujari. In addition, the temple deities or patron gods or goddesses are considered the residents literally of the temple rather than guests of the temple. So puja in this instance is modified to reflect that. For example, the deity is awakened rather than invoked or invited in the morning. Temple pujas vary widely from region to region, of course, and for different groups or schools. So if you venerate Vaishnav or Vishnu, and you're part of the Vaishnava temples, you're going to have different mantras than the Shaivites, those who venerate Shiva. A temple puja is often less active in terms of participation, with the priest acting on behalf of others than these larger sort of public ceremonies. The pujari or achaka is a designation given to Hindu temple priests who perform puja. The word comes from the Sanskrit word pujari or puja, which means worship, of course, and they are responsible for performing these various rituals, including both puja and another category of rituals called arti, which we may or may not get to later. Another name for the pujari, I just want to emphasize this because it comes up sometimes in the readings, is archaka. The construction of a Hindu temple is very, very important. It's a symbolic house and a seat and body of divinity. It is a structure designed to bring human beings and deities together across their different lokas. So deities and devas have their own lokas, the devas and the devis. They have their separate lokas. And then the humans, the manus, have our loka. But the temple, the mandir, connects them together. The symbolism of the structure of a Hindu temple is rooted in Vedic traditions, and I've referenced a quote from the Brihat Samhita so that you can read it on this slide. But it deploys essentially a combination of circles and squares. It represents recursion and equivalence of the macrocosm and the microcosm, so the deity realm being the universe and the macrocosm, and the microcosm being the human realm, this world, by astronomical numbers and by specific alignments. For your discussion post, you're just going to have 3 separate threads here. Go ahead and have a look at the questions, jump on one of the threads, and get the discussion going.